Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. In the spirit of the trees, in the spirit of living nature, of which we are a part, with deep gratitude to all the generations before us that have led us to the present moment, I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising. Now, this is session number 500. So I want to just pause as we begin our program and thank all of you out there from all over the world that have been participating and supporting our journey as we have sought through the exigencies of the pandemic to empower people all over the world to rise together. That's inherent in our name, Humanity Rising. We had the idea in March of 2020, you'll recall, that the World Health Organization declared the global pandemic around the 11th of March. And all of a sudden, within weeks, all of us were under lockdown. We were told to engage in social distancing. And this was unprecedented in the entire history of the world, that we had a common experience and all of us went into isolation. And it was a trauma. We humans are social beings. And it is against our very nature to be distant from one another and in lockdown. So we at Ubiquity University were trying to figure out how could we help? Where was an opportunity in this crisis? And we had the idea, well, why don't we just start a daily Zoom broadcast? And even though people are in lockdown, that it can at least come together through Zoom. And we can try to exchange information. We can talk about what's going on, share experiences, and take counsel together, but also to take comfort together as we all go through an experience that we really didn't understand, the outcome of which was uncertain. And all we knew is what we needed to do is virtually hold hands. So that's what we did. And on the 22nd of May, we had our first broadcast, and it was one of the most extraordinary experiences that I personally have ever had, as thousands of people came into the calls from all over the world. Over 130 countries, people have registered. We had hundreds of organizations that proactively reached out and said that they wanted to live stream and that they wanted to partner. And pretty soon, we had a tsunami on our hands, completely unintended. It was just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And we began to realize that day by day, what we could really do was emphasize the positives, the solutions, that which seeks and delivers abundance. And so we began to gather people, we began to develop programs, we began to identify various world issues that were emerging. The first one of which was actually the killing of George Floyd. Remember in late May 31st, I think it was, where he was killed. And all of a sudden, all around the world, people took note. And it was historic because there were more protests and manifestations across the United States and around the world than ever in recorded history around the death of George Floyd. So we began to explore racism. What does racism have to do in a time of the pandemic? And then other issues began to emerge. And we realized that although the pandemic and COVID-19 was the context, that humanity rising needed to be emphasized as world events unfolded and we became challenged in ways that were unprecedented. You'll remember even just last year, in August of 2021, The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said that we are now in unprecedented territory with regards to runaway climate because of global warming and the release of methane. And then the Secretary General announced that we are now in code red. And what code red means is that our governments are no longer capable of ensuring the normalcy of everyday life, because the context, the global context for human existence right now is escalating ecological turbulence. Just today in Russia, there was an explosion in a coal mine that released massive amounts of methane. That's part of our world. And in and through this, day by day, now 500 days, we've been gathering people, over 1,700 speakers, hundreds of organizations, as I said, to talk about how in the midst of this kind of centrifugal chaos, when our governments are failing us, when business is out of control, when our environment is being decimated with 1 million species, including our own, are now on the brink of extinction. What can we do together that can make the kind of difference necessary to restore a balance between humanity and the larger ecological order? That's why I have these trees in the background. Every breath we take is symbiotic with the trees and the plants. Nature is us. We are nature. And we've forgotten that. And we need to find our way back home. And that's why we continue day by day to offer these programs, so humanity can find its way back home. And it's out of that that the leadership that we need will emerge. It's out of that that the solidarity and the solutions will emerge. And that's why it's very synchronistic that the week that we have day 500, we're contemplating what it means to be conscious leaders. And in particular, today, we're not going to dwell on the problems. We all know the challenges. But we have a program in store as we commemorate our 500th day of leaders that are making a real difference in their companies, in their industries, and they're pointing the way in a business discipline that shows that with conscious leadership, individuals, companies, organizations can make the kind of difference we all so desperately need. So I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank all of you for your perseverance as we are now moving well beyond 2 years of broadcasting. And I invite you now to just take a pause, as we always do, as we begin our sessions, and just center yourself in your body. Your body is nature. We are our bodies. Close your eyes if you can. And place your attention on your heart. And for the next minute or so, just listen to your beating heart in a spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving that you're alive. We're all alive at this most extraordinary moment in the human journey, where every choice matters And all of us need to lead. Thank you, everyone. So good to be with you all today. Now I want to invite Tom Eddington, the founder and CEO of Endangered Global, and George Cappannelli, the founder and CEO of Age Nations, two dynamic, very successful leaders who are convening this program. This is our third of 4 days on conscious leadership this week. So Tom, George, thank you so much for all that you've done to support and grow Humanity Rising, and I turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. In a minute, Tom's going to introduce our two guests and give us a little more perspective on why he and I have decided that this is a particularly important and relevant program for the time we're living in, for all of the reasons Jim said. On a personal level, I've been blessed to do a lot of different things in my life, both in the public and the private sector, as a consultant, entrepreneur, founder of nonprofits. And I have to admit that when I look around at the landscape today, I am deeply ashamed of the quality or lack of quality of leadership that exists in so many quarters. And so to have an opportunity today to talk to two gifted and dedicated human beings who are demonstrating what can be done rather than what we should not do, it'll be a pleasure to explore this conversation. Because let's face it, unless we make a significant turn, and unless more and more leaders like our two guests today step up to the plate and show the way that organizations can make a significant difference in this time, we're going to continue on a relatively precipitous and dangerous slide toward more difficulty than any of us want to experience in our lifetime. So I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to today. And I ask you, those who are listening and watching, to pay attention not just to the overall theme, but to the specifics. What are these two gentlemen doing day by day? And what can you adopt from their playbooks to make a difference in your organizations, whether they're church organizations or local community organizations or Fortune 500 companies? So with that, Tom, will you give us a little overview of what we've done and where we're going today?
Certainly. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, George. It's been a terrific week so far. We started on Tuesday with the state of the world and what kind of leadership is needed, and had a wonderful conversation. Yesterday, we explored conscious leadership and what does it hold in terms of a promise for where the world is going and what's needed. And as George just said, I'm delighted to have Bob Chapman and Jason Lippert with us today to recognize celebrated leaders for the phenomenal work they've been doing with their publicly traded organizations. And we're going to be exploring who they are as leaders, who they are as individuals, not just in their business, but in their communities and in society at large. And as George indicated, part of the reason why we have Bob and Jason with us today is certainly from a societal perspective, social conditions are the biggest threat to democracy. And both of them as leaders are doing work in their communities and making sure that the people under their span of care, as Bob's going to share with us, they're sending their people home after a day's work as healthy human beings for their families and for their communities, which is not a typical conversation, not a typical vocabulary we hear from business leaders, especially of publicly traded companies. So with that, I'll just share a little bit of background about Bob and Jason. Bob Chapman has been named the #3 CEO in the world by Inc. magazine, and he's a leading social capital CEO by International Business Times. Bob's been very intentional about building a better world through the business that he's got responsibility for. He's the CEO of Barry Y. Miller, a $3.2 billion capital equipment firm that transformed by applying a unique blend of strategy and culture to a struggling $20 million business. Today, Barry Y. Miller is a combination of 120 plus acquisitions and organic growth with 12,000 team members in 28 countries. Bob's journey from traditional management to what he calls truly human leadership was inspired his Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Everybody Matters, The Extraordinary Power of Caring for Our People Like Family, which has sold over 80,000 copies. It's available in 7 languages, and a TEDx talk that Bob delivered is a case study at Harvard. It's now taught at 70 business schools and profiles his leadership philosophy. He's focused on bringing his principles to education through initiatives with Fordham University, other business schools, and several secondary education institutions, in addition to the leadership academy that exists within Barry Y. Miller. Jason Lippert, very much like Bob, is a 3rd generation leader of Lippert and LCI Industries, a $5.1 billion publicly traded company with over 15,000 team members. Throughout his 26-year career with the company, he served in many capacities, including growing the business from $150 million in revenue in 2003 to $5.1 billion today. Since 2003, Jason's been the CEO of Lippert Components, a subsidiary, and has an intense focus on building strong teams, bettering our communities, and growing the company significantly with new product innovation. Jason has successfully built upon the strong foundation set by his father and grandfather before him, transforming a steel roofing business in Alma, Michigan, into a thriving international supplier of components to the leisure vehicle and mobile transportation industries. Jason's initiated a management training program with Lippert that would prove to be integral to building a long-term diverse team from outside the business. As a result, the talent that this program has brought to Lippert helped contribute to the growth and great results. And one of the things I want to explore when we get into this conversation with Jason, like Bob, is that when we think about supporting our, providing services, products to our customers, that's helping with their success. But Jason's taken it to a whole new level in that the leadership training that he's done at Lippert, he's making available to his customers to help ensure their successful businesses and that they'll continue to thrive and be customers of his organization. So welcome, Bob. Welcome, Jason. Terrific to have you both with us today.
It's good to be with you. Thanks for having us.
The conversation.
So I'd like to start with you, Bob, and if you could share just a little bit about your personal journey as a CEO and where and how your ideas, your philosophy of leadership has come from, and how you've managed the various stakeholders that you're having to contend with, particularly the outsized voice and strength of Wall Street.
Well, you mentioned we're both public companies. Remember, Berry-Wimmer was a privately held company controlled by my family, but we have a simulated share price that kind of mimics a public company. And our share price, just for your audience, has gone up 15% a year compounded for 25 years. So this unique model we're going to share in this conversation has been validated by organic, strong value creation. But I would have to say to you in my journey, I want to start off by saying I have a typical education, business, accounting degree from Indiana, an MBA from Michigan. I went to Price Waterhouse. So I have a very traditional business education. And I joined after 2 years in Price Waterhouse as invited by my father to join this $18 million kind of old machinery company he'd bought in the 50s called Berry-Wimmer. So very traditional. So the first half of my career was applying what I learned in business school, which is about organic growth, profitability, all the things we learn in business school. The transformation for me and I was successful after some struggles. So again, I had traditional success in traditional ways, but about 20 years ago, I had a series of revelations. That's the only way I can describe it. I didn't read a book. We didn't have a consultant. It wasn't a mentor. A series of revelations that transformed the way I saw my responsibility as CEO. And when I look back on it, the way I describe it simplistically is from my education and my experience, I saw people in our organizations as functions for my success. I needed an engineer, I needed a sales executive, I needed a marketing consultant. These were all players on my team that I needed for my success running this company. I was a nice guy, I enjoy people, but I saw people as functions for my success. And the transformation occurred about 20 years ago when the lens through which I saw my responsibility completely changed to the opposite. And I saw our people in the organization as my purpose. I no longer saw them as functions for my success. I saw them as somebody's precious child that's been placed in my care, knowing that the way I would lead our company would profoundly impact their health and the way they went home each night and treated their spouse and their children. The key revelation was two things. One is I realized when I was at church that our church only has people for 1 hour a week, and we have people for 40 hours a week. The other transformation was at a wedding when I was watching a precious young man and young lady being married, a friend of mine. I realized that day that all 12,000 people for us in the world are not engineers, accountants. There's somebody's precious child that's been placed in our care. And it awakened me to a profound understanding because Washington University interviewed me for an hour and a half a few years ago. They're organizational development professors. And after an hour and a half interview, they said to me, Bob, you're the first CEO we've ever talked to that never talked about your product. And I said, honestly, we've been talking about our product for the last hour and a half. I will not go to my grave proud of the machinery we build for our customers. I will go to my grave proud of the people who designed and built that machinery, which was a revelation to these professors. So I believe, as Jason knows, Jason and I have been working closely for a number of years now. I believe some higher power, because there's no way this average accountant from Ferguson, Missouri thought of this. Some higher power is using us to show the world the way it was intended to be, where we come together, we share our gifts, we create human and economic value and go home each night feeling part of something bigger than ourselves, which then inspires us to be better parents, better spouses, better community members. So I believe business could be the most powerful force for good in the world if we had leaders who had the skills and the courage to care for the people they had the privilege of leading. That's kind of the Cliff Notes version of my journey.
Thank you, Bob. Jason.
You want the same
Transformation, yes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so there's a lot of similarities in Bob's story and mine. I came to the business in 94 after the business was about $100 million. Started welding, welded for a couple of years, and I learned the business, from the inside out. I learned, what traditional supervisors and managers would do on the front lines of the business by being on the front lines. So, as I moved up through the ranks of management, and again, I had a traditional education as well. I stopped with a bachelor's degree at Miami University in business, but in accounting and finance, but had a lot of the same things in my head that Bob talked about as I entered the workforce. But as I grew in management, I just tended to mimic a lot of the things that were happening, around me in management, because it felt like that's the way the world needed to work. So you kind of get numb and used to operating a certain way. Well, similar to Bob, we had grown, our stock price and operating profits have grown, about 15 to 20% a year compounded over the last 20 some years. And about, 2012, right after the recession, we were growing at about 40-50% for a few years. It started with a lot of conversations with God, and it was just, praying to say, hey, look, there's got to be a higher purpose for my life. And through a lot of prayer and just conversations there, I eventually, I still don't know how it happened, but I got Bob's Truly Human Leadership TED Talk dropped in my inbox, and I didn't know Bob, I didn't know who he was, and that led to, getting the book, Everybody Matters, and then it led to me eventually reaching out to him through a leadership conference and getting some time with him, and then from there, I just was try to be a sponge, and we try to mimic a lot of the things, because he showed me the light. He turned the light bulb on for me and saw that there was a better way to do business and a better way to get the results and the profits, while at the same time making substantial impact and significant impact and transformation in people's lives, all around the business. And we've got 15,000 people in the business today, that arguably, with the family relationships that those people have, we touch 50,000 people or so in a significant way. So we have this incredible responsibility to lead these people well and help them to become better at life. And our journey has been much the same as Bob's. I think he started about 10 or 12 years earlier than us, but I feel really fortunate to have met him at the time of my career that I did, to have the light bulb turned on so that we can have this incredible impact with people. And today for us, it's about the personal and professional transformation and, impact we can have in people's lives, and growth and development of human beings in our business. Like Bob said, we've got them for 40, 50 hours a week, and most companies just let them do their thing, and they build parts or whatever, and they go home. But if we're intentional, we can really have substantial impact in their life from a personal and professional standpoint, help them grow and develop, which makes them feel great. We teach them to lead better, lead themselves better, even if they're not leading people. We teach our leaders to lead better, and we coach them, and we have resources for that. And we have, we just teach the people that, are not leading anybody to lead themselves better. And, all those people go home and they lead their families better. And that just leads to a better world. So that's the long and short for me.
Thank you,
Well,
Jason.
I have to say that you both are a breath of fresh air. I mean, truly. If I had met both of you 10 or 15 years ago, I would have never left the business. But I had arrived at a point where I was really tired of going into companies, working with their senior leadership team, and then working down through the organization and trying to get them to turn their companies into conscious experiences where people were cared about. And what I would watch repeatedly was a new CEO would come in and the slate would get cleaned off and then back to the old business as usual. So in a couple of minutes, I know Tom would as well, for all of the folks that are listening, we now understand where the transformations came from, and we'd like to drill down a little bit more deeper into some of the hows, because I literally, at the end of my career, was in a stealth way doing programs that encouraged people to leave their businesses and to go out into the world and do great things, because I didn't see it possible for them to do it within the structure of their organizations. That clearly is not the case with either of you. And so, Bob, Jason, tell us some of the hows. You know, I mean, how do you translate this idea of human leadership into day-by-day functioning that people really get, they respond to, they experience the benefits of, and they in turn share it with others?
I think, let me start because I've been on the journey about 20 years. And as I mentioned, I had 3 revelations. That's why I describe it, that transformed me from what I call management, which I define the word management to mean the manipulation of others for your success.
Yeah.
To leadership, which is the stewardship of the lives entrusted to you, which is a privilege, a profound privilege. And so what happened, and really before Jason's time, about 18 years ago, we were out researching an author who wrote a book, True to Your Roots, about leadership. And a young man had just joined us, a man of deep faith, and he came from Washington University MBA program, and we were having dinner together before we were going to meet with the author. And he said something to me, because he didn't know me, that nobody else would have said. He said, "Bob, what is your greatest concern?" Well, I'm an eternal optimist, so I thought a minute. And I remember when the rector of our church, who was my mentor, was called to be the Bishop of South Carolina after 10 years of stewardship of our church. And I watched our church fall apart overnight without that rector. And so with that kind of in my mind, I looked at this young man and I said, my greatest concern is that we were blessed with the message that could heal the brokenness of this world, and it would die with me. So we got up the next morning and said, okay, you surfaced the concern I had. What are we going to do about it? I said, well, what do great religions do to survive over centuries? They articulate their profound beliefs, and then they have disciples who tell stories that bring those beliefs to life well beyond the founder's time. So I said, okay, guys, how do we create disciples who will carry this forward beyond their time? And we said, well, we can't send them back to our major universities because they don't teach leadership, they teach management. And so we said, again, that morning breakfast, we're going to have to create our own university to create disciples who will carry this forward. So it's not Bob or Jason. We all believe this is the way we are called to be stewards of the lives entrusted to us. And so with a clean slate, we began to design and build an internal university. And I want your audience to hear this, because it was an eclectic group of nice people with no experience other than they were educated themselves in building curriculum. So we had the beauty of open minds, open hearts to create disciples. One of the gentlemen, David Vandermolen, who was part of this team, a deep religious background, he said, we need to teach as a foundational class empathetic listening. And I thought, what? We're going to start a university by teaching people to listen? We know how to listen. Well, they overrode me. And so the 3 core classes were empathetic listening. And then I contributed from my background raising 6 kids, recognition and celebration, because we know in raising kids, if you don't compliment them 5 times more than you suggest things they could do better, it is difficult for them. And then culture of service. seizing the opportunity to serve others, moving from me-centric to we-centric. And so we began very roughly 17 years ago an internal university around those 3 core classes. And the interesting thing for your audience is when you think of those 3 courses, empathetic listening, recognition and celebration, and culture of service, 95% of the feedback we got from the people that went through this program is the impact it had on their marriage and their relationship with their children.
Yeah.
Until that moment, I never thought that the way I ran my company would impact people's marriage or their relationship with their children. And it was profound to me. Matter of fact, the first lady that came up to me in Minneapolis after we launched this program, 6 months later, she came to me and said, "Mr. Chapman, I just took your listening class in your university." I said, "Oh, really? What was it like?" I had no idea. She said, "It changed my life. I now know how to raise my 2-year-old daughter." I was so profoundly touched that it opened my heart. I began traveling around the country, listening to people who took these classes. And again, it was never, I ran a better accounting department, a better finance department, production. It was the impact on their personal life. So I realized in that journey that when we come into our roles as leaders and we have people in our span of care, that we can look at the financial results, the production results, but it never occurred to me the human results. So again, we then have advanced this. And so we have a university where we teach this, but then we realized we have been given a gift that could change the world. And we were compelled by these people who started coming in from McKinsey and Harvard. You've got to write this book. You've got to share this to the world. We've never seen anything like it. So we wrote a book, which I never imagined I would do. Everybody Matters: The Extraordinary Power of Caring for People Like Family. As Tom mentioned, it's sold over 80,000 copies. A typical business book sells 5,000 to 10,000. So to this day, my commitment is that we have been blessed with a leadership model that could heal what Tom Friedman calls the poverty of dignity we have in this world. Mm-hmm. We thought in the Industrial Revolution that good paying jobs with good benefits would create a good society, but it turns out that we forgot one key ingredient, okay? It's not about money, it's about dignity, feeling valued. And what it turns out that we accidentally created was we validated the worth of every individual in our care. And when they went home, they were better parents, they were better spouses. So when we look at what's wrong with the kids today, what's wrong with the family unit, what's wrong with our communities, look in the mirror, businesses. We have people in our care for 40 hours a week, and we are sending them home with a poverty of dignity, not a poverty of money. And so as we look at preserving life on this planet and the trees, we need to look at preserving humanity. We need to move from money, power, and position and success to caring for the people. And you can't ask, as Tom and I have talked, you cannot ask people to care. You have to teach them how to care, okay? It is a skill. We can't hope that our parents taught us this. Our universities are not teaching us this. And so right now we have an outreach initiative. We're trying to share this blessing through our TED Talk, through the book, through our Leadership Institute, through our nonprofit. And we are now working with the source of the issue, which is graduate education. We are now working with the Jesuit universities in the world to transform business education, to create leaders in the future who have human skills and academic skills blended together. Will create more Jasons of this world who bring their faith and their role together. They don't have to be a different person at work than the person that walks into their church. They can live life fully in service of others as leaders and know that we are preserving humanity as we preserve the earth in harmony.
You know, Bob, you talked about a critical moment where somebody asked you the question, what is your greatest concern?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is a number of years ago, I did a large program with Hughes Space and Communication. And their president at the time was a guy by the name of Don Kramer, who was a 3-star Air Force general. And I invited him to a pilot program we were doing. And he came and he stood at the back listening. And then I noticed that as the evening progressed, he got closer and closer. And then eventually he joined this circle of about 40 senior executives. And they were talking about their fears and concerns. And all of a sudden he started speaking and he said, as I'm listening to you, he said, I realize my greatest concern is that I'm going to let you down.
Yeah.
And he pulled me aside at the end of the night and he said, I want all 4,000 people at Hughes Space and Com to go through this program. And it changed their culture. So clearly these moments of awakening are really critical. Jason, talk about some of those for you and how you're translating both what you learned from Bob and other things you're learning.
Yeah, so I think everybody needs a mentor that's been through some of these things that Bob's talking about. Somebody that's, started on that culture journey, and there's, Bob and I were talking last night, there's just more and more people out there that are seeing the light and starting to make pivots in culture. But for me, you asked about the how do we do this in business and in real life? And to me, it's two real simple things, but they're really, really hard to do on a consistent basis over time. And the first is, enforcing and being true to your values in the company, and having good values, obviously, but enforcing them and being true to them, defending them relentlessly. And then secondly is just, having culture resources. And I think, I'll address the values first. Until we put values out there that were good and started, holding people accountable and everybody living up to those values on a regular basis, and then deciding when people decided to not live up to those values, whether they had been here 10 or 20 or 30 years, and I learned this from Bob, but it's, you have to respectfully transition them out of the business. You can't, it's not you're fired, you're gone. You coach them, you give them chances and opportunities, and if they can't come around, then you need to respectfully transition them out of the business, or it spoils, the values for the rest of the people. Because people come to work and they want to count on the values. They want to know that, if you put the values up on the wall, that they're real and they mean something, and that the leadership is going to do something about it if people act counter to the values. So, and Bob also taught me that, you can't put, you certainly can't put profits above the values, and you can't put values completely above the profits. You have to find a way to keep them, in parallel, so that you're focused both on them at the same time. Because if one takes a backseat to the other, it's not healthy for the business. But I think the thing I've learned over the last 10 years we've been on the journey is that you have to, if you want this to be successful, and all this sounds great, and the progress that our company's made and Bob's company's made have allowed us to grow organically the way we have and seen the nice returns. You can't do that without improving your culture, but to improve the culture, you have to have focus and intentionality there. And to do that, you have to have separate resources. You have to have resources that are dedicated to culture and leadership development. And I think that's where most companies miss it. HR today has 12, very distinct responsibilities that they've got to pay attention to. But yet we say, hey, look, there's this culture and leadership thing, and culture eats strategy for breakfast, and culture is the most important thing, but we lop it on top of HR's already busy schedule and say, here, by the way, this has got to be your responsibility, and it's the most important thing, by the way. So what we've done in our company, and I know Bob's done a lot of the same, is we've split culture and leadership and care out from HR because they've got full plates, and put dedicated resources there. We have 5 people on our philanthropy team. We have a corporate chaplain. We're adding more there. We have 12 leadership coaches, 12 personal development coaches. We've got our own leadership academy with 2 people. Those are all resources completely dedicated to leadership development and personal, professional, and growth of each and every human being in our business, which, by the way, they take those lessons home and teach them to their kids and their spouses and other people that are around in the community and families. So, but that's the one thing. I've had hundreds of these conversations over the last several years that we've really been, waist deep in this journey and really making progress. Talk to business leaders all over. And I think, like Bob, I found that, people find that decision really hard to start dedicating people and human beings to culture and care and leadership development, because A, it's not traditional, and B, they say, well, where's the return? Well, I can tell you where the return is. When I met Bob, we were $1.5 billion. I'm telling you, we couldn't have gotten to 5 billion had we not created a culture of caring and culture that's just people want to come back to and engage and, participate in at a high level. Because our attrition, when I started talking about, was like 125%. We were managing, and I think, we were just managing the turnover, but, there's a better way to do business, and we've grown to a healthy, more profitable business with, less than 30% turnover today as a result of just changing and pivoting on our culture because we dedicated those resources. So, the how for us is values and really dedicating resources to culture care and leadership development.
Yeah, picking up on that point about the values, Jason, and this is a question directed to both of you. When we look at intergenerational wealth transfer in the US, about 75% of families go shirt sleeve to shirt sleeve in 3 generations. The grandfather, grandmother builds the business, the second generation spends the money, and the third generation, there's not much left. And in both of your cases, each of you, rather than following that traditional trajectory, there's something in your personal values that is exhibited in your leadership, the choices you've made, that you haven't followed the majority of intergenerational wealth transfer of 75% of what we've seen in America. I'd love for you to talk about your values, who you are as leaders, and where'd that motivation come from?
Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, well, look, I had a good upbringing. My parents taught me good values, so that's first and foremost. But like I said earlier, for me, it was my faith. I knew that God had a higher calling, a higher purpose for all of us, and I just didn't know what mine was. And it was, sometimes it takes time to figure these things out and grow and develop personally and professionally enough to get to the point where you can, handle a higher purpose. And but I think, as we've really held true to our values, I watch it play out in everybody's life. Forget the leadership coaching and personal and professional development we do with all of our team members, all of our leaders, first and foremost, with our over 30 culture and care staff that we've dedicated to culture. I've watched, so many people on the front lines of our business, because that's where I do my listening sessions. We've got 1,000 leaders leading about 14,000 people. And if we don't get leadership right at that 1,000 that's leading the 14,000, then it doesn't matter how well we do talking about leadership and coaching up in the executive and top level managements. But I've watched, hundreds of people's lives transform because they've learned that there's a better way to do work. They feel better about themselves when they're leading themselves better, and they're leading people and serving people better. Just kind of how God wired us and designed us. So we feel at our best when we're serving people and we're caring and we're doing the things that are good and where the values are good. We just feel better about our daily lives. So it's not hard to align people to values, because we know that once they get there, they're going to really love who they are. But like I said earlier, it's in a business where people are focused on profitability and manufacturing product and output and all the business metrics that matter and what the outside would say is a successful business. We've got to counteract that inside at the front lines of our business and say, forget about all that stuff. Productivity and making common sense, smart decisions is really, really important. But how you lead yourself and how you lead people in the business is more important. You've got to get that right first. But to get that right, you got to pay attention to the values. You have to live those values out. And for a lot of people, it takes time. It's not where they came from. It's not what they were used to doing in their past job. And look, we're getting people running to us from horrible environments. We're not getting people running to our business that are coming from great cultures and environments. They're staying there. We're getting the ones that are, feeling broken and hurt and, hey, there's got to be something better. And they come to us with all these bad habits, and we have to figure out how to, again, just lead them down that values path, because it's the most important thing to get started in a healthy culture. So.
Yeah, I would add to that, Tom, that, and I think I think there's a short story who will really bring this to life for your audience. A gentleman, a very successful, financially successful, fine Midwestern gentleman, flew out to Aspen one time to have dinner with me after he heard me speak. And I didn't know him. I knew he was financially successful. And I said, what's really meaningful in your life? And he said, well, what are you really proud of? And he said, well, I'm known for my $120 million gift to my alma mater. But what I'm really proud of is my minority student athletic scholarship program. I said, great. How many students are you able to help each year through your minority student athletic scholarship program? He said, 5 or 6. And I said, that's wonderful. So I'm just curious, I have no idea. How many people work for your organization in the world? He said, 100,000. And I said, so you're telling me you really care about these 5 or 6 minority students you can help, and you don't care about the 100,000 people in your care every day? And this fine gentleman leaned back in his chair at dinner and he said, I never thought about that. And I said, let me tell you something. The greatest act of charity is not the checks you write to these fine organizations. The greatest act of charity is how you treat the people that you have the privilege of leading every day. Because that would heal the brokenness this money going to charities is trying to fix. So we have a society where we enter business to make profits. And as Simon Sinek has a beautiful expression, in the military, we honor those who give themselves in service of others. And in business, we give bonuses to people who sacrifice others in service of themselves. Simon would say, if officers eat last in the military, which means your primary responsibility is the men and women in your command, why can't we teach business leaders their primary responsibility is the men and women in their care? And the answer is we can, we are. And when we do, we will heal this self-destruction of humanity that is driven by economic gain. So I would say to you again, business can be the most powerful force for the good in the world if we simply teach people how to be a leader in our education system. So again, while we're out trying to treat the cancer of self-interest through our Leadership Institute, we're now working with education to try to be the vaccine. These young men and women in our care and education can leave their journey through education, whatever level, and go out with academic skills, medicine and nonprofits and government and business and law, et cetera. But at the same time, have the leadership skills, because we eventually promote most of those people into positions of care, whether it's in their home or at work. And we don't give them those skills, okay? And if we did, this brokenness we're feeling in the world, I have never seen in my life the number of genuine people concerned about the state of our world as they are right now, okay? Because whether it's critical race theory or Afghanistan or Ukraine or immigration or taxes, whatever, we are so divided, okay, because we don't know how to care for each other. So I would say to you, we just thought this was an internal eclectic journey. And one day Simon Sinek heard about it and he said, I don't believe what I hear. Simon Sinek's got one of the biggest TED Talks in the world, and he's got 100 million followers. Simon flew into our operation, spent 2 days talking to our people. We unencumbered by us. He just talked to people in our plants and offices and said, I'm no longer a nutty idealist. I have just seen what I dream of. I dream of a day when you can walk down any street in this country, tap anybody in the shoulder and say, do you like your job? They say, no, I don't like my job. I love my job. That's the world Simon dreams of. And he said, if it exists, it must be possible. Simon therefore started inviting Bill Urey of Harvard, world peace negotiator, in. Bill Urey comes in, spends the same 2 days and said, I just saw the answer to world peace in Barry Wayman. I said, Bill, how's that possible? We manufacture machinery. He said, I saw a place where people genuinely care for each other. And then he said something incredibly powerful, because we teach empathetic listening. He said, I now realize I've been going to global peace talks for 30 years. And I now realize that's exactly what they are. They're global peace talks. The problem in the world is we don't know how to listen, to understand, and value instead of listening to debate and judge. So again, Jason knows this. I feel that we are being used, this simple accountant from Ferguson, Missouri, with a normal business education. We've been blessed with a model that we now are privileged to share with the world that gives people hope that we can live together and care for each other. And where charity is not the checks we write, it's the way we treat the people we encounter every day, who is somebody's precious child that's been brought into this world, who simply want to know that who they are and what they do matters. And we can, as we heal the earth and preserve the earth, we can equally heal humanity. So I'll leave you with one other point here that I think is relevant. Our case was started at Harvard about 6 years ago for the first time, and they invited me up. It was a group of 160 business executives from around the world, and for a special program, they used our case, and they invited me up to sit in the auditorium as being taught. At the end of the discussion of the case, the professor, Jan Rifkin, said to the 160 executives, is Barry Wehmiller successful because of its culture or its strategy? They talked a few more minutes and voted. 75% of the people, global executives, said Barry Wehmiller is successful because of our culture. So Jan looked over at me and said, Bob, would you like to share your comments? I never thought 1 ounce about it. I stand up in front of these global executives and I said, I understand why you think our culture is why we're successful, but let me offer you my view. I believe the foundation of our success is our business model that I designed in 1988 after some struggles in the 80s. And I said, there's got to be a better way. And I designed this business model around balance of products, markets, and technology. And I thought it would take us from 20 million to 100 million. That was a dream. It took us to 3.4 billion, okay? But I said, our culture is what activates the business model. It's a little bit like Ferrari designing the perfect mechanical engine, perfect high performance mechanical engine. But we know if you don't put premium fuel in that Ferrari engine with high octane, it will not perform to its potential. So I said, our business model is the engine and our culture is the fuel that activates that engine, okay? You can't put premium fuel in a poorly designed engine and expect it to perform like a Ferrari engine, okay? So to all the leaders that are a part of this, it takes an incredibly, your job as a leader is to make sure you have a safe bus, a good business model that gives your people a grounded sense of hope for the future. That is your first responsibility. And then to bring to life your culture that activates, allows that business model to perform and send people home feeling safe, valued, and having a future so they can buy a home, raise a family, educate their kids, live in our society, feeling valued. That is what we have learned in this journey that I want to make sure your participants in this call get. Our responsibility as leaders is to give those people in our care a grounded sense of hope for the future so they can go home each night feeling valued and behave in our communities, and we can see a dramatic change in the social unrest and the inequality that exists in this country if we started, because the good news, as I said earlier, the good news about caring, it's highly contagious. When people feel cared for, they naturally care for others.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And both of you have had the benefit of being long-term CEOs. Most organizations, the CEO tenure is about 2.5 years. And so that you both, because of your leadership and your success, you've been able to retain your positions, which has given you the grace to do some of the things that you do. And I hear from CEOs all the time that they've only been in the role for a couple of years. They've got the pressure from stakeholders such as Wall Street, business or industry analyst. And so there's that piece of it. But I guess the bigger question for me is, and the way that this session was framed today is, business is driving the agenda of the world. Where is it taking us? And most people conclude that it's driving us off the cliff. And so I'd like to have you both weigh in on how you manage the stakeholders, how you're able to continue to do what you do in the way that you're doing it.
Well, I think I think the investment community today is more in tune with, obviously all the things around ESG, and they're becoming more aware of how culture can impact results, which, helps the investment community. So for us, we're explaining our culture more to the investors and how culture is moving the needle. And we'll talk about things like, we've got 100,000 hours of community service. And again, I agree with Charity. It's, writing the checks isn't going to move the needle. But again, to Bob's point, we've got, at LCI, we've got 15,000 people that, touch another 30,000, 40,000 family members. And we're, our philanthropy department, part of our culture and care department, we set up, we had 100 divisions. We set up 3 serving events for those divisions every year. So, we've got, our goal is 100-some thousand hours a year of community service. We always hit more than 100,000, but we put that mark out there. And, when a lot of the people from the front lines of the business, a lot of our people at the facilities that are coming in and making parts for us every day, we've found over the years that a lot of them just haven't served. They don't know how, they don't know where to start. They don't know who to ask. We make it really simple. We set it up, they come and they show up with their families, and we serve together, and we get to know each other outside of work, which is huge. We get an opportunity to care for each other outside of work and care for other people, and that just helps propel the business. But I think from an investor community standpoint, we're talking more about culture. We're talking about more of the things that, drive retention up and attrition down, because people, we found through studies, and it's been proven over and over again that people don't stay in one place for just the money. They prefer to have sound leadership, a great experience. They want to come to work and have fun every day. They want to love to work. I mean, they're here for 40 or 50 hours a week. I truly believe people don't want to come to work and be miserable, but 88% of the people in this country feel like they work for a company that doesn't care about them. And what's that tell you about their state of being happy or miserable? It tells you that most people are pretty miserable. So we can change that, which ultimately, Bob's message, it can really change the world. In our business, we talk to investors about this. We say business can be a force for good. That's kind of how our message is translated out of what Bob and his teams and company have taught us. Business can be a force for good. We're teaching people how to lead themselves better at work. We're coaching them. We're giving resources. We're not just saying, like Bob said, go care about your people. We're coaching and developing and helping people grow personally and professionally. We had 3,000 leadership action plans this year, where we had 3,000 people write down their goals and dreams and their actions that they're going to follow this year behind it. We're doing that every year, to the point where hopefully in the next couple of years we get all of our team members doing that, because all of them having action plans and personal and professional growth plans is better than no people in the company having personal and professional growth plans. But then again, they go out into the world and they make it a better place, because they're leading themselves better, they're leading their families better, they're leading the people around them at work better. And that's just going to gain really great momentum. And, again, our attrition's gone way down, which you can look at $3,000 to $6,000 per team member that it costs to recruit and hire and train. Only what, to lose them again in a year because you're just not treating them well and you're not leading them well. That costs a lot of money. There's the ROI right there. Thousands of people in our case. We would be turning over 20,000 people a year had we not made the culture pivot and gotten our attrition down to 30%, because of we've got a real culture of caring that people are feeling good about. So
yeah, I describe. Let me start by describing. I would say I'd want your audience to think of 3 things: people, purpose, and performance. It starts with the fundamental responsibility to the people in our span of care, to give them as best we are able, a future where they can raise their family, live in our community, and share their gifts and feel valued around a purpose that inspires them to do that, okay? Which is very important. How do you inspire people to share the gifts, the vision of your company, the vision of your organization? And then you got to perform. So people, purpose, and performance. If you don't perform, you will lose the right from the investment community to be a good steward. So it's people, purpose, and performance. There was a restaurant in Aspen called Boogie's and had a sign that said quality, price, and service. Pick any two. Okay, no. I'd like all three. This is not pick any two of people, purpose, and performance. As leaders, we are called to keep those in balance. Focus on our people. Make sure you have a good business model. It's not about getting the right people on the bus. It's about building a safe bus, which is your business model, and have drivers who are your leaders who know where they're going and how to drive that bus safely. And then anybody you invite on that bus is going to be fine. And then performance. If we don't create economic value through our business model and the stewardship of people, you will lose your legitimacy to be a leader, okay? Boards have got, and again, we saw about 18 months ago, the CEO Roundtable came out with a statement, and I know some of these people, they're really fine people, that we need to think about more than our shareholders. It's sad we had to say that, okay? But we said it in the environment of Bernie Sanders. But B, the problem is we have never taught them to care. You can't ask people to care. You have to teach them to care, okay? It is a teachable skill. So we can't simply say leaders of companies need to care more about their people, because a lot of nice people get in leadership positions and fail to gain the confidence of their investors. So it's like life, it is a delicate balance, okay? Stewardship, you can't be good to your people unless you have a business model that creates reasonable expectation. You meet the expectation of your investors who give you the legitimacy to be in business. So you can't, and again, you can't ignore that without the risk. And again, I once asked, I had a phenomenal director, Bob Lanning, and he's on the board of Chrysler Corporation, Daimler, he's chairman of Owens, Illinois. August Bush helped me recruit him, a legendary businessman. And I said to him one time, as I was beginning to do this with my board, I said, Bob, when in your public experience at board meetings did you ever talk about culture? This wise, phenomenal businessman leaned back and he thought, one time at Chrysler, we talked about executive compensation. So this is a language that is a foreign language at board meetings, okay? Because it's all about financial results for the shareholders. The stewardship of the lives entrusted to us is not normally a dialogue at board meetings. And it's a dialogue that is usually a foreign language. They have no experience at this. And I met many wonderful leaders of very successful businesses who love what we're doing, but they have no idea how to do it. So our goal is to model it, to live it, and share it. And to invite, there's a gentleman who built one of the world's largest airlines who heard me speak one time, and he said, Bob, I thought my job was to build one of the world's largest airlines. It never occurred to me to care for my 100,000 people in the organization. It awakened him to a higher calling, the human calling as opposed to the economic calling. So I believe it is a very important. We talk about life-work balance. How about economic and human balance, okay? Keeping those in balance is an important attribute of leadership and is a teachable skill, but you gotta have a good business model, okay? That gives people a sense of safety, and they will give you gifts beyond your imagination, okay? So Jason's firm has obviously grown well. He's incredibly proud of the people. I came up and witnessed some of his transformation with his people. It brought tears to your eyes. Honestly, if your audience would go in and hear some of the stories I heard at Lippert Industries, or you'd come and see our people, they would be sobbing with joy. It gives them hope that business, and in fact, all organizations, and I'll give you an example, even in the Air Force, when I was speaking in the Air Force, I was at one of the bases and I said, give me a great example. I was talking to the top leaders. give me a great example of leadership in the Air Force. One gentleman said, I had a good leader about 10 years ago. I said, what made him a good leader? He said, I think he cared about me. That is what great leadership looks like. And care is not being nice and sending notes on birthdays. It is making sure that they have a business model that gives them a future and that they feel valued and heard regardless of their role in the company. Everybody is somebody's precious child in your care that deserves to feel valued as a leader. And we know you can do it. So we're trying to live this, be true to it, grow in this to show that you can create. They're actually in harmony. Creating economic value and human value are a beautiful harmony of initiatives that could transform the world. And there's no question about it in my speaking around the world, that the world is dying for this to address this poverty of dignity we have in the world, because we have an economic model that is not a human model.
So the question for me is, clearly, you are both doing a tremendous job, both within your companies and in the message, the testament that you're giving to the world around you. And I really applaud the internal universities and all of the steps that you're taking. And I really deeply appreciate you taking the time to be as specific about the strategies that you're pursuing, as well as the values that you hold. My question is, at the beginning of this program, one of the things that Jim talked about, and in fact, one of the reasons that we're doing Humanity Rising, and one of the reasons we're looking to expand it from a one program a day to a 24/7 international channel of content. Our question is, how do we, in addition to influencing education, how do we make more of an impact on those people who are running companies today, who by having the kind of transition, by having the realizations, by learning the things that you have learned, can begin to create greater impact on the world before we run off the edge of the planet? How do we take you, both of you, and clone you in some way, create national and international conferences of business leaders? How do we give you a channel on Humanity Rising that you can speak to business leaders around the world? What can we do to help, and what can we do together to have a more immediate impact on a world that's so desperately in need of what you're talking about?
Let me say to you that, as I said earlier, my passion is to make sure this does not die. This blessing does not die with me. So, and Jason gives me hope because, again, he's in a public environment. The nature of his team members is slightly different than ours because of the nature of the work they do. And I have seen it vibrant in his organization as ours. And I also, again, the reaction of the McKinsey people, the Harvard people, the book sales, the case study, I have great hope that we are beginning to get traction beyond my wildest imagination. I have never given this talk anywhere in the world. Right before COVID, with invitations from McKinsey partners, I gave 15 talks around Europe in 5 days, and every venue was overflowing with people. They had to put rooms up with special cameras. So this is a global message, and it's well beyond business. It's in nonprofits, in education, it's in the military and government. We need leaders. So I would say to you, what Jason and I are doing is trying to not only live these values, but share these values and elevate our message, okay? So we were talking last night in anticipation of this discussion. We are amazed at the level of following and support we are gaining. The momentum is building. But our model to live these values, which we talked about, is Simon Sinek says, called the law of early adoption. Mm-hmm. We're not trying to change everybody. I'm not trying to change anybody's mind.
Right.
I'm trying to share the journey we've been on through stories that will invite people to join us, the early adopters, to show it's not Bob Chapman, it's not Jason Lippert. This is the way we are called as leaders to embrace the responsibility of leadership to the people whose lives we impact, and invite others to join us and help them along in that journey to create a movement. When Martin Luther King walked across the Selma Bridge, he didn't say, "Come on, everybody, join me." They joined him with a passion for the way he shared his mission. So the interesting thing to me is that I am a simple, accountant from Ferguson, blessed with the message, I believe, that could heal the world, okay? And the beauty is my message is told through stories, just like Jesus told our story of our faith through stories. Stories go right to people's heart, okay? Academic theories of what leadership should be go to their head.
Yes.
My stories of transformation go to people's hearts and says it is possible to care and create human and economic value and harmony. And it is a fundamental responsibility for those people. But again, I want to remind people, when you look at people as in the organization you're responsible for as somebody's precious child, treat them like you would like your child treated. Give them no less than you would want for your own child. And that is the standard of care we have. And to make sure that they're safe and valued, and we could heal the brokenness of this world and give people hope for a world where everybody matters. Everybody on every corner. It's not about, we got to move from success being money, power, and position to success mean using your gifts fully in service of others, okay? That is true success. That is what Jason embodies. That's what I hope my life embodies, to be a model of what God intended us to do, to live together where we value each other for whatever their gifts are, and we see everybody as somebody's precious child. That is the world that would transform in harmony with the earth, and we could live as we are intended to be, where people genuinely care for each other.
Well, this is not the last, I'm sorry, I just want you to know, this is not the last conversation we're going to have on this. I can assure you, there's going to be a lot more that we're going to have to talk about how this gets to the world in a way that it really needs to get there. Jason?
George, with your, I mean, sure, why don't you, 1 second to the audience, because it'd be fascinating, because you seem to be an extremely wise individual. What have you heard between Jason? What would you say to the audience that you have heard that touches your mind and heart and your journey? Because you seem to have a very intentional human journey also. What have you heard that you want the audience to resonate that you heard between Jason and me? What have you heard?
Well, you've already said it. I believe that the premise that you're talking about is a place, a point of whether you call it salvation or regeneration or whatever you want to call it. It is a message that needs to be communicated in as many different ways as possible, through stories, through practical understandings, through case studies, through all of those things. And one of these days, I'm going to get you in front of Congress. And we're going to have a real conversation about the kind of leadership that the political environment needs. But you've said anything that I can say differently. I just want you to know that you're not through with us. That's all. Jason?
Yeah, just to answer your earlier question, so I've carved out an immense amount of time in my schedule just to be able to, because people, whether people hear about us through social media in the community, we're in, 30 different states and 13 different countries, and people are hearing and seeing the message, of just a caring culture. And then through conversations that people have out in the communities that we live and work in. So, it's getting out there, and I'm carving out more time to have those conversations. I do a lot of this kind of stuff. I want people to hear the message, and if one light bulb turns off in a conversation like this, it's, again, look what the conversations I started with Bob, look what's happened. We got a leadership academy. We're consulting with, or we're talking to 100 different businesses, or have talked to about 100 different businesses to teach them some of the culture of caring things. We've learned some of the things that Bob's taught us. So every business Lippert LCI turns on, that's just one more light bulb that gets out there spreading a new ripple. And it's going to take time. I think the answer to your question is we can do a lot of this, but it's going to take time. Capitalism's good, but we went to extreme capitalism, I think, and profits all that mattered for a lot of different years. And, to get out of that, we had a very fast momentum where we're profits all that matter. We've got to, we're in the process of slowing that wheel down and turning it the other way to get, people at the center and carrying at the center of the organizations where it should be. And then they can have their profit right along with it, because it goes hand in hand. But it's going to be a slow process, and the more we can get it out, the better. But over the years, I think we're going to see an exponential cultural revolution, and people, waking up to the fact that there's a better way to do culture and to put caring at the center of business for people. Just going to take a little bit of time, but the more we get the message out, the better.
I want to invite Jim, this other troublemaker, back in and let him, I know he's cooking in the background. So Jim?
Boy, what an extraordinary conversation, Bob, Jason. You fill us all with hope, because I think what I'm feeling is the purity of your intent and the clarity of your message because of that purity of intent, to build companies that are strong from the inside out. And so I just want to acknowledge that. And I think I would just have a couple of questions. I would love to have both of you talk about the environment, and how the caring that you're demonstrating for your employees and your colleagues, how do you view the environment and the care that we all must make equally intimately and with equal compassion as we care for each other's? Because I think that's the problematique in the world, is that it's no longer sufficient just to care for people. We have to care for the environment simultaneously. So I'd love to hear both of you speak to how your companies are tending to the environmental impact and the environmental context in which you operate.
Jason?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I believe that, if we create people that are capable of caring more, and they're just taught to care, that it's okay to care for 40, 50 hours a week where they spend most of their time, they're going to care about all the other things that matter in this world. They're going to be in a better position to care about those types of things. So I think that's number one. I think culture has a direct impact to how people care about the rest of the world when they leave this place. But from a business standpoint, we, like everything else, we said, hey, look, we're going to move culture. We got to put people and resources there to move the needle on culture and prove that we care care about our people. Same thing's true with, sustainability and the environment. We can't just say, hey, look, let's all try to do a better job and put some metrics in place and measure some things around, the environment. We have to hire people and have resources there. And that's not been a traditional thing to do, in business. So we hired a sustainability leader at a high level in our business just a couple months ago. So, we're beginning on that journey, exploring a lot of these types of things we can do to better care. Some of our philanthropy initiatives include, environmental caring and things like that. We do, not money donations, but actual serving events around the environment. So, but I think sustainability and having people in, having a resource and a department that is responsible for caring about the environment is a good place to start.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, I'll mirror exactly what Jason said. I think it begins with caring for our team members, because people who don't feel cared for, it's difficult to care for the environment or their community if they don't feel cared for themselves. So again, as I said, we have found caring is highly contagious, okay? And then in terms of the environment, what I'd say to you, I'm very proud that our company is very involved in a number of global initiatives that I think would have a meaningful impact. We're very much involved in the transformation from plastic in containers to paper and aluminum, which are perceived to be more environmentally friendly. We're very involved in Italy and different methods. In Italy, in Europe, they're very concerned. It used to be when we had most of you aren't old enough to know, but in the original can, when you pull the tab off, you throw the tab away. And eventually they found a way to keep the tab of the can connected. So environmentally, these weren't floating around in lakes. Well, now we are working through our technology in Italy on caps that stay tethered to the container. So when you take your cap off your soda bottle, it stays on the bottle. So we're not seeing caps in rivers, but we're also involved in the conversion of many of these cases from a plastic water bottle to aluminum. So we are a big provider of aluminum, where we have our single largest demand last year was from the conversion of the use of plastics, which is perceived not as environmentally conscious as aluminum. We're also very much involved. We just came up, instead of plastic bubble wrap that you would see in your packages, we've worked with our German company has worked with a major company in Germany to develop paper bubble wrap. Okay. So environmentally it's paper. So there are a number of other issues around our company that we are working with companies who are embracing how do we be more, not good stewards of the human race, sending people home sensitive, but also being good stewards. And like Jason, we have a sustainability focused individual who's trying to take all these initiatives and help our people see that we are trying to be good stewards of humanity and the earth humanity enjoys. So I like to believe, like, economic value and human value need to be in harmony. And I think human and the earth need to be in value. It's not one or the other, it is both.
And then one final question to both of you that's come up in the chats is, how has this culture of caring affected in any way your organizational chart? In other words, as people have cared for each other more, has the org chart flattened? Do you still have a traditional board, CEO, C-suite, management, employees, etc.? How has caring affected governance?
Jason?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say our org chart is transformed, but certainly when you put we've got a VP of Culture and Leadership, and Dr. Amber Selking, and she's done a phenomenal job putting all these new boxes and chaplaincy and personal and professional and personal development and leadership coaching, our leadership academy that goes out and mentors other businesses. So we've got a whole new org chart around culture and care embedded in our old traditional org chart that would look like anybody else's. You start adding sustainability and things like that. So I think, we've got a Dream Achiever program and somebody responsible for that. We've done over 3,000 dream sessions in the last 5 years. And Bob, that's what Bob was alluding to. We brought some of our people that have went through the Dream Achiever program on the front lines for our business to tell stories of personal transformation through us just sitting down with people and saying, hey, look, let's talk about your dreams, and aspirations in life. And the sad truth is that most people in their 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, they stopped dreaming when they were a teenager. People, when we have those sessions, they cry because they're like, my own family's never asked me about my dreams, let alone the company I work for. We've done over 3,000 of those sessions, and we help hold them accountable to accomplish their dreams. And again, this gives people hope. It gives people a sense that we care about them. And then this, it goes beyond the extent. They don't just forget about that stuff when they leave work every day. They take it home, and that passes to the kids and the spouses and everybody that they're around, because they can't help but talk about it.
Yeah, I think I would say organization. We haven't changed the nature of the family. We still have parents and kids, and I don't think the organization is the issue. It is the empowerment. It is the way you see the organization. And I'd say, Jim, the biggest change in us is we've flipped the focus. Our people are our purpose, okay, as opposed to profit, okay. Our people as our purpose. We have to create value to be good to our people, but the biggest organizational change is we flipped it upside down.
Yeah.
Okay, and we see people as our purpose. and that will give the dignity in the world. It will heal the broken. We think it is about bringing money, sustainable ways to people, but what we need to bring them is dignity. At every part of, regardless of your blessing, of your intelligence or your skills or your inheritance, that if we can bring a sense of dignity where people see people not as a janitor or an executive or a boss, but they see people as everybody's precious child, Jim, we could heal the issues that are of great concern to us all. When my granddaughter graduated 5 years ago from Aspen High School and everybody was cheering for their child as they got the diploma, I had tears in my eyes because I knew the world we were sending these kids into, this broken world where 88% of all people feel they work for an organization that doesn't care about them. 65% of all people would give up a salary increase if they could fire their boss. There's a 20% increase in heart attacks on Monday mornings when people have to go back to work.
Yeah.
When CEOs talk about the healthcare crisis, Jim, I said, you are the problem. 74% of all illnesses is chronic. The biggest cause of chronic illness is stress, and the biggest cause of stress is work. As Jeffrey Pfeiffer at Stanford said, he wrote a book called Dying for a Paycheck, and he talked about us. And he said, we are killing 120,000 people a year through work-related stress. So, Jim, this message is a healing message. It gives people hope of a world the way it was intended to be, where people could smile with your grace and feel that we live fully in service of others.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Bob, brilliant. Thank you. Jason, this is, I can't think, Tom and George, of a more perfect way to celebrate our 500th day than to have these two superstars of human caring grace us with their presence as they have today. This has been profound. It's as simple as caring for each other, and through extension, caring for our earth.
Yes.
With dignity. Perfect. Beautiful. Thank you.
And don't forget, you haven't heard the last from us. We're going to be.
And by the way, just so you both know, we're launching an IMBA in September, an inner MBA that is an MBA degree, but emphasizing exactly what the two of you have been so passionately talking about, that the heart of business is people, and that there's an inner MBA, and the courses aren't taught in any conventional MBA program.
We need it.
So we're launching an MBA, and I would love Bob and Jason to be in touch with you to participate or consult in some way on how we move forward with it, because it's the first of its kind anywhere in the world that we know of.
One condition.
Inner MBA.
Jim,
One condition, yeah.
Barry Wehmler University has been around 15 years doing exactly that for 15 years. And now we're sharing it with the 200 global Jesuit universities. So
Fantastic.
We are on the same path, Jim. We are on the same path.
Fantastic.
Serve humanity. Okay.
Fantastic.
We'll do it. I just want access to the graduates. I want to be able to recruit those graduates.
You're on. Tom, tell us, just summarize in your own way and tee up tomorrow.
Yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation, as I knew it would from the years we've known each other, Bob, and the conversations you and I've had, Jason. So you exceeded what I had hoped we would
Totally.
do today. And thank you both for the leaders that you are, the human beings that you are, and what you brought to this conversation today. There's a rightly earned impression of a business in the world. And it's not a pleasant view of business. And I appreciate you both sharing a very different perspective of what business can be. And thank you for that. Tomorrow is going to be an interesting conversation. It's about leadership in politics. And the question that I think most of us have is that an oxymoron? we don't see a lot of leadership in politics. And so we're going to finish off this conversation with the arc of this week. The trajectory was business and politics are driving the agenda of the world. And so tomorrow is a conversation on very similar to today on the political dimension of how the world is where it is and where do we go.
The answer to that solution is really simple. It's accountability.
Yes.
Hey, Tom, honestly, I had a chance to speak to 200 members of Congress. And the problem is, again, education. These political leaders are no different than our business leaders. They were never taught to listen. They were taught to talk. And until we teach every human being, the greatest act of leadership and caring is to listen with empathy, to understand and validate, not to debate and judge. That fountain, if you can get that across in our universities, the politicians are a product of our universities. They're taught to debate, I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah.
And we see it in the world, in our country, in our communities. We are never taught to listen, to understand, to validate. And the biggest thing I want your audience to realize, the greatest act of caring, the greatest act of humanity is to listen, to understand, to listen, to validate, and not to judge and debate.
Yeah.
And I think that, Jason, what you said also is really important about accountability. And I think one of the ways that we get accountability from our leaders is if we, the people, begin to require it of them in a way that we are currently not doing that. And so your point, Bob, about education at all levels, we need to learn to be more responsible and accountable, and then we need to learn to hold those who we elect or appoint or nominate as leaders. We have to hold them accountable. It's been a phenomenal session today, and I look forward to talking to you both and finding other opportunities to bring your wisdom and your experience to the world. It's badly needed. I'm not going to suggest that you run for president and vice president because we don't want you to lose the capacity you have for doing good. But nonetheless, we look forward to more conversations.
Thank you for the chance to share our message.
Yeah.
Thank you
guys.
both.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone. That'll do it for us for today on Humanity Rising. You're all welcome to the after session chat group. You'll see the link in the chat box, and we'll see everyone tomorrow, same time, same station, for the fourth and final day of our program on conscious leadership. Bye for now.
Bye.